Chilling tales for dark nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications. The following interactive performance is a first-round entry in Chilling Tales for Dark Nights 2025 Evil Idol voice acting competition. And you, listener, get to help decide who advances to round 2. Voting is simple. Following the performance, simply click the thumbs up icon on this video if you'd like this contestant to move forward, or the thumbs down if you'd like to see them be eliminated. Voting on this entry will conclude 1 week after the date of its posting. Thank you, and good luck to all of our contestants.
Warren hated that old house. It was coming up on 2 years since he first bought it. The real estate agent called it a fixer-upper, but that was just a polite way of saying it was a money pit. A place where dreams went to slowly die. Everything in that house leaked and creaked, from the basement to the roof, and everything in between. It had bare wooden floors that warped and leaned at crooked angles. Bathrooms wallpapered in heavy mildew and old cigarette smoke, and lights that blinked whenever he walked down the hallway. And it was cold. Real cold. Starting in the first months of fall all the way through the dead of winter, the house was filled with a dampness that cut to the bone. Wind whistled through the old window frames, no matter how much he tried to block them up with blankets. Even when he could manage to stop a draft from coming in through one window, another would just simply take its place. The whistling unnerved Warren, like a distant crying in the woods. Most nights, he would wake up shivering from the cold air pressing down on his chest. He even started wearing thick socks and shoes around the house just to keep the feeling in his toes. And then there was the sound. It didn't happen every night, but most nights, just after 6:30, after eating whatever he picked up for dinner, it would start. Warren would be on the couch trying to watch the news when it would start somewhere deep down in the basement. Thump, thump, thump. It was a thick sound, like footsteps, but heavier. The basement door, which he always kept closed, was between the living room and the kitchen, a place he rarely went. As he sat down to watch television, he would hear it move slowly up the basement stairs, one agonizing step at a time. Thump, thump, thump. For an entire year, he'd been trying to ignore it, pretending it didn't exist. But each night, the sound grew harder and harder to block out. Tonight, as he tried to watch a movie for a change, he was just getting comfortable when he thought perhaps maybe he'd been left alone for the night. But then that familiar sound started from the bottom of the basement stairs. Thump, thump, thump. Moving slowly, climbing the stairs one at a time, Warren turned up the volume and leaned in closer to the television, straining to hear a movie he could already barely follow. But the sound only seemed to grow louder. It hammered on his skull. He closed his eyes and counted to 10, praying that it would go away. But each count was accompanied by the sound echoing up from the basement, like the heartbeat in his own chest. Thump, thump, thump. The sound mocked him, teased him, attacked him until he thought for the 1000th time about moving out. But he had no money left after what the house had eaten up, and he had his pride to think about as well. What would the neighbors think of him if he packed up and ran off in the middle of the night? What would they say about him when he was gone? And still, the sound came through the basement door. Thump, thump, thump. When he couldn't take any more, Warren turned off the television, jumped up from the couch, turning to face the basement.
Stop it!
His voice echoing off bare walls and a sagging ceiling.
Just stop!
He knew the sound wasn't real. It couldn't be. There was nothing down there but a long set of wooden stairs ending in a hard concrete floor. If If anyone could see him now yelling at the air, they would think he'd gone mad. But Warren lived alone these days, and there was no one around to think any less of him. Warren glared at the unpainted door, willing it to be silent. But still it came, louder and louder, slowly creeping up the basement stairs. Thump, thump, thump. A laugh bubbled in his throat. He was being ridiculous, of course. He walked to it, still not believing, still not letting the possibility of it into his head. Step by step, foot by foot, he crossed the living room, his feet dragging slightly on the warped floor until he reached the basement door. Thump, thump, thump. With breath caught in his throat, Warren stared at the unpainted door. It hadn't been opened in a year. Even through all the nights of listening to the sound move up the stairs again and again, of holding his pillow over his ears praying for sleep. It was time for all that to change. This twisted game had gone on long enough, and he refused to entertain the idea any longer. He had to put an end to this while he still had one last nerve to do so with. Tonight was the night that Warren took his house back. But then he noticed something. In the moment he'd been standing in front of the door, willing his hand to reach up and touch the handle, the sound of the basement had stopped. All except for the house's frame creaking under the wind outside, the house was silent. Warren, with his heart booming in his chest like a man trying to escape his jail cell, he slowly reached up and touched the handle. It was cold and solid. Real. He almost laughed again. The thought that his hand might pass through it like a hook through a jellyfish. The idea that he'd been expecting anything else was ridiculous. With a deep breath, he turned the handle and slowly, very slowly, opened the door. The long creak of an unoiled hinge overtaking the throbbing in his ears. The darkness of the basement seeped through the crack between the door and the frame. One sliver at a time, the basement stairs he hadn't seen in a year were revealed to him. That long path beneath the ground. Old, uneven slats of wood dipping down into a pool of black thicker than paint. Ka-thump, ka-thump, ka-thump. The sound suddenly rose up from the basement stairs faster than ever before. It came at him, excited to see him, as if it was about to crash through the door and leap out at him. Warren slammed the door shut and ran to the front door, ready to escape in the night and never come back so long as he lived. His body was electric. His heart felt like it was clawing its way up his neck so it could escape through his mouth. He'd never been so terrified in his life, never so sure of the danger that came for him. With his hand on the front door, he stopped. He took a moment to think about what he was doing. Where would he go? What would he say when he got there? With nothing but a crazy story in his pocket, who would take him in? Who would even believe what he had to say? And then a new sound appeared. The front door came alive under his hands. He stumbled back, almost falling. Warren stared at the front door, horrified that he had not just one, but two doors to be scared of. But even in his panic, he knew something about this knocking was different. It was normal. Nothing like the sound he'd been living with for the past year. With shaking hands, he approached the front door again, looking through the peephole. A worried face and red hair. He sighed. It was the neighbor next door, the young woman who liked the garden. She lived on her own, he remembered. Something about her parents leaving her the house. She looked like she was unsure about being on his doorstep, her body language saying she was about to leave. Warren considered staying quiet and letting her go. But something in him needed to speak to someone. Anyone. Even a woman he'd barely said a dozen words to in the past 2 years. Warren opened the door. She looked back at him with concerned eyes, waiting for him to say something. But he didn't know what to say. What could he say? "Hello?" he managed. "Sorry to knock on your door so late," she said. "But are you alright? I thought I heard someone shouting." He stared at her for a moment. He thought of his outburst a few moments earlier, yelling at a door. He was embarrassed to think anyone had heard that. "Oh," I was watching a movie. I probably had the volume too high. He motioned to the living room. She glanced over, the living room visible from the front door, and saw the television turned off. I was. To be fair, it was true, just not exactly what she heard. Her face relaxed. I'm really sorry, I shouldn't have interrupted. No, I'm glad you did, he replied. It was the most honest thing Warren had said in a long time. She smiled, and for a second he forgot all about the sound in the basement. What was it? She asked. He blinked. What? The movie. Oh, you know, I already forgot. She put her hand on her mouth and laughed. The friendly sound of it brightened his doorstep in the night beyond. Was this what it was like to be normal? It had been so long since he'd spoken with someone that he forgot what it felt like. To talk to a person, to make them laugh. Well, that doesn't sound like a very good movie. No, I guess not. She nodded, brushing her hair behind her ear. Well, as long as you're okay. I'm sorry, I tend to overreact sometimes. But honestly, I'd hate myself if I found out someone got hurt and I didn't do something about it. I hear about this stuff all the time. No, it's no problem at all. I'm glad someone's looking out for me. She smiled, saying goodnight and apologizing once again for the intrusion. But before she left, she turned back to Warren, looking a bit unsure of what she was about to say. Listen, I know you haven't gotten out much since... She shifted uncomfortably, as did he. But if you ever need an ear, I'm right next door. I know how lonely it gets in these big houses. It does, I guess, Warren said. Not knowing what else to say, he added, Thank you. No problem. She paused again. I never talked to her, but she seemed nice. She smiled sheepishly, then gave a small nod and headed back to her house. Warren watched her go, then closed the door, locking it behind him. It was coming up on 2 years since Warren and Mary Lynn first bought the house. Mary Lynn, with her hair black like a raven's feathers, had been as nice as a red-haired neighbor when they first met. But the house had changed her. It changed both of them. The fixer-upper consumed them until it was all they could talk about, all they fought about. When he thought of their last argument, his face burned red at the memory. That day, he seen a side of both of them that still shook him. The basement had fallen silent since he left. He went to it, feeling the deep embarrassment of a man who'd woken up from a screaming nightmare he'd sworn was real while he was still in it. What was in front of him now was a completely normal, unpainted door, and he had to face the fact that what he'd been hearing, what he'd been experiencing in the last year, was the result of a man unprepared to move on. He opened the door, not slowly this time, not with reverence of fear, but like he would any other door. The squeak of its dry brass hinges was brief, like the tiny yelp of a surprised mouse. Without flinching, Warren forced himself to look directly at the basement stairs, and to see them for what they really were. Earthly things of wood and nails, and nothing more. As he looked down upon the stairs, Warren felt a chill run through him. At first it started on his back, a cold spot like someone had pressed an ice cube to his spine, and it moved through his blood like a shadow over open ground. The tiny hairs on the back of his neck stood up, as he felt the unmistakable presence of someone standing behind him just over his shoulder. His nose picked up the hint of a familiar perfume, and yet he didn't dare turn around, didn't dare look. As he stood there, frozen with fear, Warren's mind drifted to that day no more than a year earlier. Can you please paint this today? Mary Lynn stood in front of the basement door with her small hands on her waist. Please? Warren put down the black garbage bag he was carrying, stuffed to the gills with broken glass, moth-eaten pillowcases, and old wires he'd pulled out of the spare bedroom. the one they'd never quite gotten to.
You know the whole house is falling apart. Why are you so obsessed with one door?
Because it creeps me out.
And painting it will change that.
Well, we won't find out unless we try. He wiped the dusty sweat from his brow with his forearm, leaving the garbage bag behind.
You can paint it too, you know.
Maybe I would if I wasn't busy cooking dinner.
I didn't ask for dinner.
Well, I don't see you doing it.
That's right, because I'm not doing anything at all, right?
It went on like this for almost an hour, the two of them shouting louder and louder, forgetting all about the dinner burning on the stove, an expensive piece of fish gone black. They'd fought so many times already, but this time was different. This time around, the fight grew bitter and petty. Warren and Mary Lynn, standing in front of the basement door, screamed at each other about every dripping faucet and rusty nail in the house. All because he hadn't gotten around to painting one simple door. It came to a point where Warren was flinging the basement door open, shouting that he would just take it off its hinges and remove it if it bothered her so much. Each time he did, Mary Lynn slammed it shut, screaming all kinds of nasty things at him. Things Warren never thought he would hear come from the lips of the sweet girl he'd married. And then, in the heat of the moment, Warren did something that shocked both of them. He grabbed her. Mary Lynn looked up at him with fear in her eyes. Before she could pull away, he wrenched her over in front of the open door so she could take a good hard look at the stupid basement stairs before her. And when she had a good hard look at them, he leaned in close to her ears so that she wouldn't miss a word.
You're so scared of the basement?
He hissed.
Look at it!
Warren didn't recognize his own voice coming out of him. It didn't even feel like him saying it. But before he could stop himself, before the little voice in the back of his mind could ask him what he was doing, Warren gave Mary Lynn a hard shove towards the stairs that bothered her so much. Warren shook, unable to move. A pressure overcame him, his eardrums about to burst. Whatever it was behind him, whoever it was, he could feel the hatred coming off them in waves, pulsing like a blacktop in summer heat. Unseen lips drew closer, close enough to kiss him. With cold breath drifting across his neck, the shadow behind him whispered in his ear, "Look." And then he felt it. A single push. Warren tipped over the precipice of the basement door. Either the fear or something else kept his arms from working, kept his hands from stopping his fall. His head was first to hit the basement stairs. He heard a loud crack as his neck bent sideways, and a deep pain shot down through his body, followed by a messy tumble down the stairs. He felt every broken bone, every dislocated leg as he flopped and rolled down the long set of steps, ending in a hard stop on the cold concrete. Warren couldn't move his legs. His body was shattered, his breath shallow. His eyes rolled in his skull to look up at the distance he'd fallen. Up the stairs that looked a mile long from where he now lay, all the way to the basement floor. It was now coming up on 2 years since he and Mary Lynn bought the house, and 1 year since she died. And yet, there she stood, hair as black as the raven's feathers, blowing softly in the draft that never left. She was pale and beautiful and cold, her diamond eyes cut from pressure and pain.
Please,
Warren whispered. It was all he could manage to pull from weakened lungs. With a light touch of her small hand, she closed the still unpainted door. The dry hinge creaked like a dead tree in the winter wind. Then, all the light cut out, plunging both Warren and the basement into pure darkness. The black encompassed him, surrounded him, drawing the heat from his now shattered body. Finally, the house that Warren hated so much was finishing the job of bleeding him dry. He could no longer feel his feet, or really much of anything else beyond the slowing of his own heart. Gasping like a fish, Warren summoned whatever he had left and focused on reaching the stairs. All he knew is they were somewhere in front of him, in the dark. By some miracle, he got his arms to work. His useless legs dragging behind him, he began pulling himself along the frigid basement floor. Barely able to lift his head, Warren clutched the bottom step and pulled himself up. The strain of his broken neck was too much to hold. His head slumped, pounding against the wood. Yet still he didn't stop. He couldn't. Not until he reached the top. Maybe there he could call for help loud enough that someone would hear him. Maybe the nice neighbor with the red hair. There wasn't anyone else close enough to hear. No one else who cared. One step at a time, he dragged his cold body up the stairs and towards the door, hoping to be saved, praying to be forgiven. And one step at a time, his head fell and struck the wood. A thick sound, like footsteps, but heavier. Thump, thump, thump.
Thank you for listening. I'm your host, Steve Taylor, reminding you that if you haven't already, don't forget to cast your vote for this contestant via either a thumbs up or a thumbs down vote. New entries will be posted throughout this month. Be sure to tune in and vote for each of them and help decide who becomes the next evil idol. Until next time, turn off the lights and turn on the dark.
Chilling tales for dark nights.